2023 has been an absolutely wild year for the Sonic franchise. We've been getting non-stop content and most of it has been pretty high quality at that. I feel like I've made this point a lot with my recent Sonic reviews, but I genuinely believe we're living in one of the best years this franchise has ever seen. Adding to that pile of cool stuff was Sonic Superstars, which was revealed at this year's Summer Game Fest presentation back in June. The game was to be developed as a collaboration between Sonic Team and Arzest, who has a pretty spotty track record. Regardless of that detail, I was still hyped as hell being a lover of all things Sonic. The last 2D Sonic game we got was Sonic Mania, a game that came out 6 years ago. It also happens to be my second favourite Sonic game of all time, just behind Sonic 3 and Knuckles. I love that game to death, but what held it back slightly compared to its 16-bit predecessor was the fact that I just wish there was more original stages and emphasis on storytelling. Those are two things that really elevated 3 and K for me, on top of just how perfect everything else is in that game. Goated stuff right there. So going into Superstars, I was hoping that it would essentially have the feel of Mania, but with the originality and storytelling of 3 and K. After the initial trailer, we got more and more news about the game, including the fact that the physics were pretty much one-to-one with Mania, even getting the approval of Christian Whitehead himself. Of course, being the lead developer on Mania, this was a huge deal, and his company, Evening Star, is actually credited in the final game. I'm sure he did have some involvement in making sure the game felt right, so that was already a huge green flag going in. Eventually we found out that all of the game's zones would be completely new, and this was when I started to get a really good feeling about this game. It sounded like it was about to be exactly what I wanted as a follow-up to Mania. Then, for a while, the game kinda went silent. By the end of the summer, Sega seemed to be more focused on marketing the Final Horizon update for Sonic Frontiers, check out my review of it, shameless plug, which definitely put the Superstars hype on the back burner. Not helping this game's case was the fact that October was an especially packed month full of very exciting releases. Arguably, but not actually arguably, the two most exciting releases were Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Spider-Man 2, which just so happened to be releasing the same week as Superstars. This ended up being another shot in the foot for the game, but we'll talk more about that later. I know this is a lot of context here, but I wanted to get it out of the way to better justify my feelings towards this game. The fact of the matter is that Sonic Superstars was fighting an uphill battle from the start. Was this game going to live up to my admittedly pretty high expectations? Well, the game came out on October 17th and I've played through it 3 times, so let's see. Spoilers ahead. If you don't want to know what happens, go play the game first and then come back when you're done, alright? Alright. First of all, let's go over the story, since that part will be fairly quick. Eggman has made his way to the North Star Islands, which are home to much larger variants of Sonic's animal buddies. Essentially, bigger batteries means bigger badniks, and these are the mini-bosses we fight throughout the game. He enlists the help of Fang the Hunter, formerly the Sniper, also known as Knack the Weasel, to track down the Chaos Emeralds and awaken a beast powerful enough to realise Eggman's dark ambitions. They happen across a native to the island known as Trip. She's the new character for this game, designed by Naoto Oshima, the original creator of the Blue Blur himself. Trip, as her name suggests, is extremely clumsy and often acts as an unintentional foil to Fang. Obviously, once Sonic, Tails, Knuckles and Amy catch wind of what's going down, they band together to take down the Triple Trouble. Sonic and friends recover the emeralds and unlock their unique and previously unseen powers as they trek across the North Star Islands. Trip and Fang are constantly at odds with each other up until a breaking point, where the Sun Gazer removes her armor and uses the emeralds to transform into her unique dragon super form. She takes out Fang's prototype Gundam and allies herself with Sonic and the gang, taking a particular liking to Amy, who helped her out earlier. The team takes down the Egg Fortress and returns to Earth to celebrate another victory. Psych! Turns out Fang and a rogue Egg Robo want to continue causing issues, so it's up to Trip to eliminate the threats to her home in a similar fashion to Knuckles' campaign from S3 and K. After that, a big ass purple dragon appears and now we gotta fight it as Super Sonic. Okay. So, yeah, this is the thing Eggman was trying to awaken, but much like the rest of what I've been saying, these are just guesses based on context and the prologue animation we got on YouTube. Basically, I pulled this entire plot summary out my ass because the game doesn't do a great job of actually building up to this dragon guy. So anyway, Trip seals him in an egg and the day is saved for real this time. Roll credits. Now, I genuinely do like the plot here. They actually did try to go for something a lot more ambitious than what we usually get for classic Sonic, but some of this stuff just doesn't work with the visual storytelling style of S3 and K. Not helping that is the fact that you literally need to watch the 4-minute YouTube animation and read the prologue comic only available on Twitter to understand Eggman and Fang's motives in this game. As a diehard fan who eats up all this stuff, I'm cool with that, but it does make things a little more inaccessible for casual players, who are the audience they were aiming for this time. So while I enjoyed the story, big ass purple dragon out of nowhere aside, some people may be left confused. Alright, so let's talk about the part that people actually care about with a classic Sonic game, this little thing called the gameplay. As mentioned before, the physics and general control of the game are practically one-to-one with Sonic Mania, with the exception that the spin dash may have been nerfed. I can't actually tell the difference myself, but I have seen a lot of people talking about that, so I felt it was worth mentioning. Thankfully, we don't have another Sonic 4 or Sonic Forces repeat on our hands this time, which is awesome. All the characters feel great to control, and if, like me, you're a seasoned veteran when it comes to Sonic, you'll immediately feel right at home with this game. Movement-wise, all the characters come with a spin jump, roll, and spin dash, and each character will have their own secondary move. Sonic has the drop dash returning from Mania, and basically every other game after that. Tails has a signature flight, Knuckles glides, although the glide doesn't actually gain any speed, which did bother me quite a bit once I noticed that. And of course we have Amy, who just recently became playable in her classic form with Origins Plus. She can double jump with her hammer, allowing for easier platforming and a longer ranged attack to fight enemies, and can also perform her hammer rush move from Origins. In terms of difficulty, I'd say Knuckles is the hardest character to play, mainly due to his lower jump height, followed by Sonic, then Tails, and then Amy is the easiest. I'd recommend using her if you're not as experienced with Sonic games. On beating the main campaign, you unlock Trip as a playable character in both her own story and the main story. She can also double jump but uses her scales to scale up any surface, similar to the Spike Wisp from Sonic Colors. Side note, I love how she shares a similar jump style to a certain other reptilian Sonic character, great attention to detail there. Be warned though, Trip's story acts as the hard difficulty, so get ready for some BS in her later levels, as well as something else we'll get to later. And oh, trust me, we will get to that. You might be wondering how exactly Sonic Superstars differs from previous classic Sonic games in the gameplay department. Well, the main draw of this game, outside of the 4-player local-only co-op, are the new Emerald powers. Each of the 7 Emeralds have their own unique abilities, though it's never explained how or why, so just go with it. The Blue Emerald gives you access to Avatar, which spawns in an army of shadow clones that can help you collect items, take out enemies, or damage bosses. Probably the most versatile and useful of them all, even if it can be easy to get lost in all the chaos. Haha, I'll be here all day. The Red Emerald gives you access to Bullet, which morphs you into a fireball to shoot off in any direction you choose, useful for reaching alternate paths or beating bosses. Next is the Purple Emerald, giving you the power of Vision. This reveals invisible items or platforms and is probably the ability I use the least. The Light Blue Emerald gives you the power of water, enabling you to climb up waterfalls or swim in any direction without the fear of drowning. Definitely the most situational out of them all. Next up is Ivy, which spawns in a vine that helps you and your teammates reach areas you couldn't get to before. Not very helpful if you're playing solo, as Bullet can just do that but faster.
Time's slowing down now with the Yellow Emerald power slow.
This can be useful if you need to take a minute to assess the situation or move through particularly fast objects. It can actually come in surprisingly clutch for certain boss fights. Lastly, the White, or is it technically clear, Emerald unlocks a unique ability for each character. Sonic gets the homing attack, which locks onto enemies or breakable objects for him to bash. Tails creates a small tornado projectile with his tails. Knuckles throws a punch that blasts out an energy wave. Amy has her Hyper Hammer Toss move back from Origins, and Trip spits out a literal Mario Fireball. Like, it bounces exactly the same in everything. The Emerald powers are very reminiscent of the Wisps in that they can actually be pretty fun and add quite a bit more depth to the gameplay, but sometimes devolve into situational abilities that don't really add much. They definitely weren't created equal, but I can appreciate what they were going for and would like to see it expanded in a future game. Having fun gameplay is one thing though, doesn't matter if it doesn't have the levels to back it up, so what are the zones like this time? Well, let's go over them. First up is Bridge Island Zone. It's alright. It does just about everything a first area should do, gets you accustomed to controls and mechanics you'll see throughout the game, and does so in a way that doesn't interrupt the flow. It just doesn't really stand out all too much, but it's a good first level regardless. Next is Speed Jungle Zone, which basically acts as this game's chemical plant, being the high-speed second zone. I love the aesthetic a lot, grinding on the rails looks super cool and is exhilarating when you can keep up the pace. This zone also introduces character-specific acts, in this case Act Sonic, which has you avoid Fang's attacks as he pursues you through the jungle. I could really do without the darkness mechanic in Act 2 though, I just find it breaks the pace of a level called Speed Jungle, which feels like a huge sin to me. Up next is our first single act zone in Sky Temple. This level may take you upwards of 7 to 8 minutes on the first playthrough, but you can cut it down pretty significantly once you get a better feel for the layout. I'm a huge enjoyer of Sky level themes, and this one definitely delivers with its random but enjoyable Brick Breaker segments and Windy Valley callback. Time for the obligatory Casino Zone. Pinball Carnival is literally just a combination of Casino Night and Carnival Night Zone, but leans harder into the funfair aspect. Act 2 is where it shines with the more spooky Halloween twist, and the most dangerous roller coasters ever put into a theme park. Also, the Tails doll makes its second ever game appearance as this stage is Gold Bandit. Love to see it. Lagoon City is this game's water level, which is obviously trying to evoke feelings of Hydro City. Yes, this is how it's pronounced, fight me. And seeing as how that's my favourite Sonic zone, they won me over. Amy gets a solo act here where she can brutalise some unsuspecting fruit and do an escort mission? Well, that's definitely a choice, but surprisingly one I don't hate. Act 2 takes place almost entirely underwater, but is salvaged by having the best music track in the entire game, and being one of the few places where the water ability is actually useful. Sand Sanctuary is our second single act zone and is a contender for my favourite zone in the game. I have a huge soft spot for desert levels, even though most people seem to hate them, so it already wins in the aesthetic department. It's also arguably the best designed stage in the whole game. Essentially they combine Sandopolis Act 1 and Mirage Saloon Zone into one, and it's pretty glorious. Then we got Press Factory Zone. Honestly, it's pretty bland, and I think Act 1 actually should have been a rhythm-based level where the piston drops with the beat. That would have made it much more engaging as a mechanic. Act 2 is more interesting, with you being on a constant timer with the level set to explode if you don't hit the switches. But the level design doesn't feel like it accommodates this mechanic much at all. The level feels like it should be faster paced and more like a Metroid escape sequence, but it's more just stop and go platforming. Now the fun just ends with Golden Capital Zone. First of all, the level feels very confused with what it wants to be theming wise. I know it's meant to be based on some of the early concept art for Sonic 1, and that's pretty cool, but it ends up being just that, with like a bunch of concepts just slapped together that don't really fit. It's got elements of a casino level while also being a lava level, and neither of these fit with the background or even the foreground elements. It all feels really sloppy, and the level design is pretty flat and boring here for the most part. Act Knuckles is the highlight here and actually shows us the mural from the prologue animation, which is the only hint of foreshadowing for the big ass purple dragon. But the level design is a bit of a mess in this act. Oh, also the main selling point of the game is just taken away from you completely in Act 2. Yay! Cyberstation Zone, much better. I've always been a huge fan of these techno-styled levels in Sonic, and with the last one we had being a Shadow the Hedgehog of all games, it's nice to see that theme make a return here. The voxel-style characters are super fun, and I enjoyed the octopus and rocket sections. They give huge Geometry Dash vibes. I hate the mouse section though, that part sucks. If you get hit once, your ass is going all the way back down, on top of probably not being able to get your rings back. The penultimate stage is Frozen Base Zone, which is another cool level theme that I'm glad to see represented. If you aren't tired of the puns by now, I salute you. This zone is also nothing too special for the most part though. It's reminiscent of Robotnik Winter from Sonic Triple Trouble, which is pretty appropriate, and Act 2's Fantasy Zone shmup is a fun tribute. Each character also gets a unique Eggmobile based on the first game they appeared in, which is also neat. Egg Fortress Zone is the final stage of the game and is naturally stuffed with things that will just kill you, and also things that should not kill you but do anyway. Outside of the slow anti-gravity sections, I actually really enjoy this level quite a lot, and it becomes even more ingenious once you get to Act 2. Now you have to play the same stage you just beat, but in reverse. I actually really respect when level designers can pull this off and make a level that's genuinely well designed in both directions. So that's it for the zones, and honestly it's a pretty good lineup with only one straight up bad zone, 2 mediocre ones, and 8 good to great ones. I consider that a win. Just like Sonic 3 and Knuckles and Mania, each zone has a boss for both acts, so I'm going to talk about those real quick. Every Act 1 stage has a mini-boss, aside from one-act zones, powered by one of the big animal buddies. These bosses usually take 3 hits to defeat, so even though their attack phases can be pretty drawn out, they don't overstay their welcome. The same cannot be said for the major boss fights in the Act 2 stages. These bosses will usually take at least 6 hits to defeat, which means they are twice as long. Now, I understand why they designed bosses like this. They were trying to make it so that you couldn't just spam attacks at the bosses and defeat them like in previous games. The problem comes when I'm waiting somewhere between 30 seconds to even a full minute before I can attack again. Seriously, every boss in this game has this issue and it makes them genuinely unbearable on repeat playthroughs. Most of the bosses aren't even hard, so you're usually just standing around or dodging extremely telegraphed attacks before you can strike again. Worse yet is the invincibility duration they have. Some bosses look like you should be able to attack them after performing a hit, but do not try this. They're usually intangible for around 10 to 15 seconds after the first hit, so God forbid you try to speed up this process in a Sonic game, because chances are you'll fall into a pit and die. Believe me, death is something you really want to avoid here, or you will be repeating an entire 3 to 5 minute fight. And if all that wasn't bad enough, the few bosses that actually are difficult end up feeling extremely unfair and even more dragged out. Take this battle against Fang in Golden Capital for example. It's an auto-scroller where you're controlling the small platform and dodging his various ranged attacks. This fight has a ton of issues, ranging from it being extremely difficult to re-grab your rings once hit, the camera movements sometimes forcing you into obstacles, and the insane length of the thing. You need to hit him a total of 9 times, and in between phases you have to spend about a minute dodging a bunch of fire and lava. Again, the difficulty here wouldn't be anywhere near as obnoxious if the fights weren't so artificially drawn out. The final battles are where things get even worse, if you can believe it. The first of the 3 final bosses against a giant Eggman mech and is by far the least painful, which is saying a lot because it's still bad. The first phase isn't too difficult, but it's pretty long-winded. You have to hit these blue missiles back at him from behind so he doesn't deflect them, which is simple enough. In between missile shots he'll spawn these huge laser walls that are very easy to dodge, or he'll attack the ground, which removes some of the foothold while also shooting energy balls at you. This attack can be a little scary, but just stay calm and keep running as you dodge. Once you get to the end of phase 1, he'll smash the ground with both arms to take out the platform right under you. This one is pretty much just a beginner's trap that you won't see coming the first time, but it's pretty easy to dodge if you just jump right as he's about to slam down. Once you beat that, he reverses time to fix his mech, and then the battle changes to be more like the giant Eggman Robo from S3 and K. He's constantly chasing you, shooting lasers and destroying the foothold. I would recommend just spamming your emerald powers for this phase. Start normally by having him do his crush attack, then hit him when he's vulnerable. After that, wait about 10 to 15 seconds and then let the avatar power rip. Wait again after the power depletes and then use bullet to finish him off quickly. Make sure when using bullet to aim for the head, and now you've done it. Honestly, the main trouble with this fight just comes down to the length, as dying at any point will send you all the way back to the checkpoint before the fight, so you'll have to start all the way back from phase 1. This is likely going to happen a lot due to his insta-kill attack, so just stay calm and try to follow my guide here if you want to have an easier time. The next final boss you'll face is in Trip's story. The first phase is against Fang and his upgraded Marvelous Queen, and this part isn't too bad once you learn the pattern. When he shoots out his missiles, just keep running and then jump out the way when the last couple are about to hit you. After that, he spawns a few lasers that will instantly kill you when deployed, so go towards the side of the screen he appears on to hit him early before the laser can come out. His third attack has him create shadow clones and try to dive bomb you, so keep an eye out for the real one and try to hit him on his way down using your double jump. For his last couple of attack phases, use Avatar to deal some quick damage and then use Slow for the final laser attack. The real bullshit comes in phase 2. Fang brings in his now completed Gundam mecha and has an abundance of insta-kill attacks. First, he spawns some enemies that you'll need to hit back at him, similar to the Eggman mecha fight. Then, he'll try to trap you in these laser webs and then shoot at you for a Smash Bros. Screen KO. This will kill you instantly. To dodge the web shot, stand still and wait for the target reticles to stop moving. If he shoots 2 on either side of you and 1 above you, make sure you're centered between them and then jump diagonally out the way. If he shoots 2 above you and then 1 directly at you, keep moving so that you can have some momentum as you jump out the way. Try not to jump too high though, or you'll be caught in the webs. You can actually mash out of these, but you need to mash hard or you're cooked. For the cork shots, just simply keep running in the direction you're already headed as quickly as you can. He'll drop these capsules that burst open with cyan and orange discs. Dodge the orange ones and hit the cyan ones back at him from behind so he doesn't swat them away. The next attack is complete bullshit and you will 100% die to this the first time around, so here's some advice. After you hit him around 5 to 6 times, his nose will glow yellow, so keep an eye on his face. When this happens, it means he's about to smash the platforms on either side of you, so make sure you're out of the way or you will die. But don't get careless, because right after that he'll smash the middle of the platform with his face, so I'd recommend jumping out the way when he attacks with his arms, then use Trip's double jump to land between where his arms are and where his face will land. Be quick to damage him when he's vulnerable, because it's an extremely short window. After that it should be 1 more hit to defeat him, so just try to stay calm and you should make it through. This took me an hour to beat on my first playthrough on stream, and it completely broke me. This is somehow the hardest boss in the entire franchise, and again, what makes it worse is the fact that it's just so goddamn long. So if you die at the end, and you will die, you have to repeat the entire 8-minute fight again. But we're not even done. After you beat Trip's story, you unlock the last story. This is just a supersonic boss fight against the big ass purple dragon, and holy shit. If Fang was the hardest Sonic boss fight ever, this is the longest. I'm just gonna say this off the bat, you can't beat this fight if you try to do it as quickly as possible. If you just start attacking him immediately, you will lose. What you're basically forced to do for this fight is spend the first phase grinding rings. You heard that right, grinding in a Sonic game, and not of the rail variety. I would recommend grinding somewhere between 100 and 120 rings before you get to phase 2, because during that phase there's seemingly less to collect. This means you have to spend at least 10 minutes on the first phase to collect enough of the rings dropped by Sonic's friends. They only fly by periodically, with the most common character to appear being Knuckles and the most rare being Amy and Trip riding a big flicky. They'll drop 10 ring capsules, so it's actually worth waiting for them to increase your ring count enough. Anyway, the first phase starts with him spitting out red boulders for you to dodge and blue ones for you to hit back at him. After that, he spawns a huge cluster of blue crystals that will turn red and then shoot off as projectiles, making it harder to grab rings if you're hit. He then flies in and changes the view to start shooting black holes at you that you have to dodge or you die instantly. This can happen while Sonic's friends are dropping rings, which interrupts that, so you end up missing out on a ton of rings. Bullshit. During this part you can actually catch up to him and hit him, which I didn't realise until like 40 minutes into my hour-long attempt at this fight, because the game does an awful job at telegraphing this. If you do get caught in one of the holes, you have a few seconds where you can use Super Sonic's dash move to escape, but this does cost rings to use. He repeats those attacks until you hit him around 4 times, then he gets a new attack where he curls up into a ball and shoots from one side of the screen to another. This attack is pretty easy to dodge, so you can keep collecting rings. Another thing I didn't realize is that if you actually make contact with any of Sonic's friends, you can get some extra rings, so make sure to do that. Once you get to the second phase, his attack will change up a bit. The first one he'll do is a giant hand swipe attack that you can actually hit, but it feels extremely inconsistent if it counts as a hit or you getting hit. As a side tangent, this also applies to some of the badniks too, namely this octopus one. I swear it's like a 50-50 gamble if you take him out or take damage instead. That aside, next he'll spit out these energy discs, so just maneuver yourself into the center to dodge it. Easy. The attack where he changes the view has now changed to fireballs instead of black holes, so try to dodge these all the same, catch up and hit him as quick as possible. Close to the end of the fight he'll start spitting boulders directly at you that you need to destroy to progress the fight. Hit the jump button as the cyan circle overlaps the grey one to get rid of them. The timing is pretty tight, so just try to get into a good rhythm. His last attack is a giant laser where you'll need to move around in a circle to avoid it, then strike him the same way you did with the boulders. Then, after probably 20 long minutes, you will finally be done. So yeah, I know I basically just turned the review into a guide there, but that's the problem. The game doesn't communicate its mechanics during boss fights well enough, so I feel like I should clue you guys in before you attempt it yourself. More than anything, I can't stress this enough, these fights are way too long and drawn out to the point where it's no longer testing your skills, but just testing your patience and wasting your time. These bosses are the worst thing about the entire game, and honestly are the main reason why I believe this is the classic Sonic game with the least replay value. I really hope they can fix this for the next game because it's genuinely unbearable and docked off so many points for a game I would have otherwise loved. That genuinely sucks. A lot of levels are fun as hell, but I never actually want to beat them because of these frustrating, boring, and even frustratingly boring battles. Alright, ran over. Let's talk about some other stuff now. Another big part of this game was the soundtrack, which we knew had Tee Lopes, Jun Senoue, and various composers who worked on the Frontier soundtrack making songs for it. Pretty loaded cast of composers here, each with their own distinctive styles, so how is it? Well, it feels like just that. Each song has its composer's signature written all over it, but it never actually feels cohesive. If you listen to a soundtrack like Frontiers or Adventure, there's a set tone and style of sound to it that they stick to for the whole game, despite having various genres. In Superstars, you can go from a level that sounds like this to this. Jun Senoue did the majority of Sega Mega Drive-esque songs just like in Sonic 4. Some of these tracks are genuinely awful, like this one. But some of them are pretty good. This man is a great composer and responsible for the most iconic songs in all of gaming, but I think we should get someone else to do this style of music in the future. Between some of the worst tracks on this game, his work on Sonic 4 and even the Origins stuff, it's clear that he's a little out of his depth, especially when there are other composers on this soundtrack that use the style much better. The soundtrack unfortunately ends up being a mixed bag, which actually means it ranks even worse just because Sonic soundtracks are always so top tier. The good stuff here is really good though, so I can't knock it too much. I mean, you've been listening to the soundtrack for the whole video up until now, so I'm hoping some of it is at least decent. Now, I'm actually not going to talk about the co-op or battle modes here since Sega made the extremely smart decision of not having crossplay despite using Epic servers for online modes. This means I actually had no one I could play with due to having different systems, and I'm also currently living alone so couldn't do local play either. What I will say though is that the amount of medals you need to collect to customize your battle robot is absurd. You only have enough medals to make maybe one of the metal characters from one complete playthrough. That means you're going to be doing a hell of a lot of grinding if you want to make the metal of your choice, or if you want to make them all. The best way to get medals is through the Act Fruit stages you can unlock in a handful of zones. These are extra acts you can get by collecting hidden fruits in the levels or landing on the fruit icon when you bust open Flicky capsules. The more rings you get in these stages, the more medals you get. You can also replay special stages by finding these blue warp rings. This time your reward will be 5 medals, so this is a pretty good way to grind them as well. Your creation will actually show up as a boss for Cyber Station Zone, which is a very cool detail. Generally speaking, Sonic Superstars has really nice visuals, but there are a couple easy tweaks they could make to improve it. First of all, I wish you could unblur backgrounds because some of them are fantastic. I know this is a feature on the PC version, but it's missing from consoles, so that would be nice. Sometimes there can be weird visuals or unpolished animations that feel like they interrupt the flow, but I can usually ignore that. And actually, speaking of polish, yeah, this game needs some. This game is kinda broken, and there's even a very common glitch that involves going to the shop when prompted, exiting, and then ending up at the entrance to the final zone without an eggmobile. If you walk to the left, you'll just keep falling through the map indefinitely. It's actually kind of impressive how this got past QA, but it's at least pretty funny. The music and sound effects tend to glitch out a lot too, especially when you use super forms. Also, this happened to me out of nowhere, and there's apparently a bug that speedrunners exploit in Egg Fortress Zone. But yeah, generally speaking, the game probably needed more time before release, which brings me to my final point. Sonic Superstars is a good game. Not bad, not mid, not great, and definitely not amazing. Just good. Which is a huge shame because I was at least expecting a great game out of this. It was really looking to be everything I wanted out of a classic Sonic game following Mania, but it just fumbles in ways that frustrate me too much to ignore. Adding to that is the fact that they have the balls to release this next to a game like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which will get its own review in the near future, so stay tuned. That was a game that left me genuinely considering if it was my new favourite Mario game of all time. Now, it's not very productive to compare two games that had entirely different goals in mind, and that's not what I'm doing. All I'm saying is that I was hoping Superstars would have me considering something similar but for the Sonic series. Unfortunately, it didn't do that for me, even though it had everything it needed to do so. It was so close and yet so far. So yeah, maybe my expectations were a little high, but with Sonic's recent output, you can't blame me. The series is in a really good place right now, so I feel it's right to expect that kind of quality. Although I didn't get that this time, I know that a couple fixes or changes could definitely improve this game a lot. Maybe it will just come as an update, or they'll release a plus version of this game like they've done with all their recent classic Sonic titles. Maybe they'll take some of the criticism on board for the next one. Either way, we'll see what the future holds for Sonic Superstars, and I'll always be excited for what comes next. This game may have been a bit of a mess, but it was a pretty good mess. Whew, so that was my longest review yet. If you managed to get this far, congratulations, you're one of the elites. But yeah, I had to make sure I got all my thoughts out there because I know a lot of people really enjoyed this game, so I needed to make my perspective clear. At the end of the day, the game was a win regardless of how I felt about it, and that's what really matters. With that said, let me know how you felt about the game. I love hearing what other people have to say, but make sure to be civil as well. We're all here out of love for the Blue Bastard, so keep it chill. The next project is likely going to be a review of Spider-Man 2, so keep an eye out for that if you're a Spidey enjoyer. Make sure to leave a like if you want to see more stuff like this, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to hit 25 subs by the end of the year, and all your support would be greatly appreciated. That's all from me for now. Take care, people.